Hello students, my name is Arshan and today we are gonna do the first chapter of your class 7th Science NCERT textbook. The chapter name is Nutrition in Plants. In your class 6, you might have learned that food and nutrition is very necessary to sustain life both in animals and in plants. Some components of food are carbohydrates, fats, fibers, minerals. All these components are called nutrients, which are necessary to sustain life in us. Nutrition in plants. Plants are the only organisms in this entire world that can make their own food. They do so by using certain processes, whereas all the other animals and organisms are dependent on those plants, whether directly or indirectly. Plants use nutrients to grow them, to make them, and to repair their bodies. Now, nutrition. Nutrition is the mode of taking in food by plants or animals. There are two modes of nutrition, autotrophs and heterotrophs. Now the name suggests auto means self, trophs means nourishment. Hence autotrophs are those which make their own nourishment, that is, we know are plants because they can make their own food. Heterotrophs, it means other nourishment. Heterotrophs consist of animals and some plants also because they cannot make their own food and they are dependent on the plants for their food directly or indirectly. Now students, you may ask that how does these plants make their own food? Where are the food factories of plants located? Where do they get their raw materials from? And even if they get raw materials, they are plants. How will they transport these raw materials to their food factories? We will learn about all this in the next topic. Leaves are the food factories of the plants. The synthesis of foods takes place in leaves of the plants and the raw materials from the environment of the plant is transported to the leaves. The plants also require carbon dioxide. For this carbon dioxide, the leaves of the plants have small openings. These small openings in the leaves of the plants are called pores. These pores are surrounded by guard cells. You may also refer to the figure illustrated. You can clearly see the guards and the pores. Carbon dioxide from the environment is taken in from these pores. Now, the raw materials, that is water, minerals, these are transported from the soils to the leaves of the plants. This transportation takes place by small vessels. These vessels are present throughout the plant. This is a safe passage-like structure made in the plant from the roots of the plant to the leaves of the plant. The plants takes in water and minerals from the soil and then transfer it to the leaves where the synthesis takes place. You will learn more about this transfer of minerals and raw materials in your 11th chapter. Now, we will learn about this very interesting topic. This topic is photosynthesis. The leaves of the plant contains a green pigment. This green pigment is called chlorophyll. What is the use of chlorophyll, you may think? The actual use of chlorophyll is to take in the energy from the sun and use that energy to produce food for the plants. Now, synthesis of food takes place in the leaves of the plant, that we know, and also the name suggests synthesis, it means making of, production. Now, with the use of this chlorophyll, the energy from the sun is taken into the leaves of the plant, and by using that energy, the water and minerals which is taken by the roots of the plant is converted into the food of plant. As this whole of the process takes place in presence of sunlight, this process is called as photosynthesis. As the name suggests, photo means light, synthesis means processing or combining, which means combining in light, hence photosynthesis. So we find out that chlorophyll takes in the energy from the sun and then photosynthesis takes place in the leaves of the plant. Now without the sun or the light of the sun, this process is not possible. Hence we can say that as we all are directly or indirectly dependent on the plants for our food and plants are directly dependent on the sunlight, we can clearly say that all the ultimate power or source of food is sun. Can you imagine a world without photosynthesis? Because without photosynthesis, there will be no food for the plants, and if there is no food for the plants, there will be no food for us. It will be a world of darkness. Also, photosynthesis takes in carbon dioxide and produces oxygen. And you may also know that for us and for your parents and for you, oxygen is very necessary for survival. During photosynthesis, the plants takes in carbon dioxide and water and convert it through the process of photosynthesis into its food and oxygen. We can see this clearly in this equation. Here, carbon dioxide is mixed with water. When sunlight falls on the leaves containing chlorophyll, photosynthesis takes place, resulting in the production of glucose, that is the food of plants, and oxygen, which we also use. During the process, oxygen is released and starch is made. This starch can be in various forms, either glucose or we can also call them food of plants. This food is consumed by plants, resulting in their growth and in their nutrition. Now students, some of you may also have noticed that all plant leaves are not of green color. Some are green, some are red, some are brown, some are even dark colors. So how does that photosynthesis happens in that? We will learn more about this by this activity. We will take two potted plants of the same kind. Keep one in the dark or in a black box for 72 hours. And the other in sunlight. Now we will perform iodine test with the leaves of both the plants. Now we will record our test results. We will leave the pot which was earlier kept in the dark and in the sunlight for 3-4 days and perform the iodine test again on its leaves. We can see the observation. The leaves other than the green also have chlorophyll. The large amount of red-brown pigments can be clearly seen. The observation can be as follows. Because of the leaves and chlorophyll present in them, in sunlight they produce starch, due to which we will see a different result when we do iodine test, and for the leaves that were kept in the dark, the iodine test results will be different as there is no starch present in the leaves. Now students, the fact of the matter is that the leaves which are not in green color like red or brown, they also contain chlorophyll and thus they are able to make their own food. You might also have noticed in a pond or in a lake the green slimy content on the stones or on the shores of the lake. Those are algae, and algae are also containing chlorophyll, which results in the green color of them, and they also do photosynthesis to make their own food. Now students, we will do the topic of synthesizing of foods of plants other than the process of photosynthesis. As you might have learned that photosynthesis is the process by which the plants make its own food in the presence of sunlight, and then it consumes that food or that nutrition for the sustenance of life. Now we have learned that by the process of photosynthesis, plants takes in carbon dioxide and water. By the synthesis process, they make it into carbohydrates. But have you ever wondered what about the nitrogen? Nitrogen is present in plenty in the environment, in our air, but plants cannot take that nitrogen directly. So how does they consume nitrogen? As we know that nitrogen is present in abundance in the environment, but the nitrogen that is mixed in the air cannot be processed directly by the plants. So what does that plant do? It takes the nitrogen which is in soluble form. How does the nitrogen gets converted into soluble form? That is the work of a bacteria. That bacteria is present in the roots of the plant. It consumes that nitrogen and makes it into soluble form. That soluble form is very easily taken in by the plants. Hence, plants get nitrogen also. Some examples of this process are like the legumes. When legumes are used or are cropped in an agricultural field, the bacteria present in the roots consumes the nitrogen, makes it into soluble form, which is then in turn consumed by the plants. As we have studied in our previous classes that nitrogen is present in abundance in our environment, in our air, but plants cannot synthesize that nitrogen directly. They need nitrogen in a soluble form. Now that happens with the help of a bacteria that is present in the roots of some plants. That bacteria is also called rhizobium. The rhizobium bacteria process the nitrogen which is present in the environment and converts it into a soluble form. That soluble form nitrogen can be processed by plants. Hence, the plants, for example, like legumes and peanuts, are used for this nitrogen processing. When this nitrogen is processed and is used by plants, it also results in increasing the nitrogen content of the soil. For example, you might have noticed that farmers plant these crops in alternate fashion. First they crop a leguminous plant so that the nitrogen content in the soil increases, and then they go with a plant of their own choice which requires nitrogen. Hence, by this process, plants get nitrogen from the environment and the requirement for protein other than the carbohydrates gets completed. Students, our world is a world of exceptions. We have learned that there are plants which are autotrophs. But do you even know that there are plants which are heterotrophs also? Heterotrophs means, as we have learned earlier in this chapter, that those who cannot make their own food and are dependent on other plants for their food. One example of this is amarbel, or its scientific name Cuscuta. Refer to the figure, you may notice a yellow tubular structure twining around the stem and branches of a tree. Now, this plant, this heterotrophic plant, it cannot make their own food. So how will it derive its food? It is dependent for its food on other plants. This type of mode of nutrition, where a plant or a organism stuck onto another organism or a plant for its own nutrition, is known as parasitic form of nutrition, and this type of plant is known as a parasite. You may notice, as I have given the example of amarbel, it stuck on the stem of other plants and takes its nutrition from that plant. Refer to the figure. Now, you have seen the figure, you might get an idea that what a parasite is. But do you students know that there are some type of plants which are totally heterotrophic and they are dependent on their nutrition by eating other small organisms or plants? Yes, it is very possible, and one example for this is the pitcher plant. Kindly refer to the figure. This pitcher plant can trap insects and digest them. It may be of green and of some other attractive color. The pitcher-like structure which you can see in this figure is the modified part of the leaf. The apex of the leaf forms a lid, and when I am calling it a lid, its function is to open and close. As soon as an insect comes and sits inside that pitcher, it closes the lids and then consumes that insects by its digestive juices. This type of pitcher plants is found in the areas which have heavy rainfalls and heavy forest. It is also found in some parts of our country as well. As this plant is insectivorous, hence these are known as insectivorous plants because they are dependent on eating insects for their nutrition. Now students, some of you may also think that this pitcher plant is an insectivorous plant, but it is also in green color. So does it also do photosynthesis? Well, I'll give you a hint only, that photosynthesis requires chlorophyll, which is a pigment in green color. Hence you know the answer. Now students, you might have noticed mushrooms in your vegetable markets. Your mom may even have made it. You might have also noticed those small umbrella-like structures in rainy seasons, in grounds or on wooden logs. What are those? Those are also a type of plants. And if they are plants, then how does they get their own nutrition? We will learn about this by the following activity. We will take a piece of bread and moisten it with water. We will leave it in a moist, warm place for 2 to 3 days until fluffy patches appears on them. Refer to the figure 1.8. These patches may be white, green, brown or of any other color. You can also observe these patches under a microscope or a magnifying glass. Now notice down your observations. Now students, you might have noticed in this previous activity thread-like structures and the fluffy material. Also the mushrooms which we have seen in the vegetable markets. These all are known as fungi. These fungi derive their nutrition from dead and decaying matter. They grow on them. How does they do that? They do that by secreting a digestive enzyme. That digestive enzyme dissolves the material. The dissolved material or the solution is absorbed by these fungi for their nutrition. This type of mode of nutrition where a plant or we may say fungi derives its nutrition from the dead and decaying matter is known as saprotrophism, and the plants which does that are known as saprotrophic in nature. Some example of it are fungi, which you may have also noticed in rainy seasons on your shoes too. Now how does they grow? They are actually present in the air which is around us, and when they get favorable conditions for their growing, they grow on the surface. Cause when we did the previous activity with the bread, we provide them with a favorable condition with water and a surface to grow on, that is bread. Hence they grow on it. Students, we will learn about something very interesting. There are some organisms which live together, share shelter and nutrition. This type of relationship is known as symbiotic relationship. For example, a fungi which lives on a tree. The tree provides the fungi with all the nutritions which is required for the bodily functions and maintenance of the fungi, and in return the fungi gives the trees some nutrients which are required by the tree itself, for example nitrogen. This type of relationship is known as a symbiotic relationship. A very nice example of this symbiotic relationship is of lichens. In lichens, an alga and a fungi lives together. The fungi provides the alga with a place to live and with some food also, and the alga does photosynthesis and is the source of food for the fungi. This is one of a very good example of a symbiotic relationship. One provides shelter and other provides nutrition, and they both are codependent on each other. Students, have you seen farmers? They use manures and fertilizers in their fields. After every crop, before crop, they use it for a better yield. Rhizobium bacteria, which is present in the roots of leguminous plants, as we have talked earlier also in this chapter, converts the nitrogen that is present in the atmosphere into soluble form, which can be easily taken up by plants. Now this nitrogen which is used by plants is taken, but some of it also remains in the soil, which increases the fertility of the soil. Fertility, you may ask, is the presence of certain nutrients, phosphorus, nitrogen and all other nutrients etc., which are required for good growth and good yield of plants. This example of rhizobium into the plants is a very good example of a symbiotic relationship. As you know, rhizobium bacteria is dependent on the plants for its nutrients, and in turn it provides the plant with nitrogen, which is also very necessary for the plants. Now students, we will conclude this chapter. We have learnt a lot today. We have learnt nutrition is necessary for the sustenance of life. Plants make their own nutrition by the process known as photosynthesis. Hence, they are known as autotrophs. Some other plants and animals which do not make their own food are known as heterotrophs. The process of photosynthesis involves taking in of the raw materials, that is water and nutrients, in the presence of sunlight with the help of chlorophyll, converting them into energy and oxygen. This oxygen is utilized by us as well as other organisms also. The process of photosynthesis is one of the very important process in the nutrition of plants. The mode of nutrition in which the organism is dependent on the dead and decaying matter is known as saprotrophism. Some example of it are fungi. The mode of nutrition in which both the organisms are codependent on each other for their survival and their nutrition is known as symbiotic relationship. With all these points in mind, students, now we know what type of nutrition a plant required, and as we know, nutrition is very necessary for the plants and for us also, because we are also indirectly or directly dependent on the plants for nutrition. So next time when you see a plant, keep in mind that whether it is an autotroph or a heterotroph or some other form of nutrition. Keeping this in mind, we will learn more about them and can take care of ourselves and these plants also. Till then, goodbye.